Opendoor stock closed out Friday's trading session at $4.45 per share, up 18 cents, or about 4.2% on the day. Considering the broader market was down, this was a positive showing. In the aftermarket, the stock gave back a nickel, trading more or less flat. Now, on the surface, that may not look exciting. But given the swings we've seen over the past 2 weeks, rallies toward $5, pullbacks to the low fours, and everything in between, flat trading into a long weekend actually feels constructive. It suggests consolidation, a chance to catch our breath, and the possibility of building a stronger base around this $4 to $5 range. But the weekend is about more than price charts. With markets closed for Labor Day in the US, it's a moment to reflect on what's happening in the bigger picture. And there's no shortage of storylines here. We have Eric Jackson wrapping up his 13th consecutive day of standing outside Drake's mansion with his now iconic sign. We have word that he'll be visiting Opendoor's offices this week, potentially meeting with interim CEO Shrisha Radhakrishna for a photo op or even a live stream. We have ongoing retail chatter around board reform, with Keith Rabois' name consistently resurfacing as someone who could bring founder DNA and vision back into the company's leadership. And we have the ever-present hum of the open army, retail investors from across the globe, continuing to push the narrative forward with ideas, energy, and optimism. So let's break this down. First, Eric Jackson. For nearly 2 weeks, he turned what started as a stunt into a full-blown campaign. Standing outside Drake's house with a sign urging him to invest in Opendoor grabbed headlines, stirred laughs, and, most importantly, kept Opendoor in the conversation. The streak ends on Tuesday, but the impact remains. What makes this story powerful isn't just the persistence, it's the creativity. Retail investors are finding ways to keep this stock visible, to make it part of the cultural conversation. And now, as Eric shifts his attention to Opendoor's headquarters, there's the potential for something even more meaningful. A meeting with Shrisha, even a brief photo, would symbolize the connection between leadership and the retail base. It would be a clear visual that retail matters, that their voice is not just heard but valued. Then there's Shrisha himself. Since stepping in as interim CEO, he's struck a tone that resonates with the open army. He's leaned into social media, responding to comments, acknowledging issues, and, most importantly, buying shares himself. That insider purchase was the kind of action retail had been demanding for months. It signaled conviction, alignment, and confidence. And when he followed up by saying that other board members would also be buying shares, it marked a cultural shift, from a passive, disengaged board to one that is willing to put skin in the game. If Eric's activism brought energy, Shrisha's alignment brought credibility. Together, they've created a sense of momentum that goes beyond price action. Now, add Keith Rabois into the mix. One of Opendoor's original driving forces, Keith has been vocal online about what the company should be doing. He's pointed out that retail has shined a spotlight on Opendoor's potential. He's noted that leadership needs to capitalize on that momentum with better storytelling, stronger innovation, and a clearer vision. His comments validate what retail has been saying for months. And while there's no guarantee he rejoins the board, the fact that his name keeps coming up in conversations shows how much investors crave a return to the company's founding DNA. A board with someone like Keith back in the mix would represent more than just a personnel change. It would symbolize a reorientation toward growth, vision, and entrepreneurial spirit. What's striking about this convergence, Eric Jackson's antics, Shrisha's alignment, and Keith Rabois' commentary, is how each represents a different but complementary force. Eric is the spark, keeping the story alive in the cultural and retail conversation. Shrisha is the stabilizer, grounding the narrative with real insider action and operational credibility. Keith is the visionary, reminding everyone of what Opendoor can be if it rediscovers its entrepreneurial roots. Put those three forces together, and you have the makings of a movement that's bigger than just one stock chart. Now, let's not forget the macro picture. The Federal Reserve has signaled that rate cuts are increasingly likely later this year, perhaps as soon as September. For a housing-focused company like Opendoor, that's critical. Lower borrowing costs stimulate both buyers and sellers, driving transaction volume and making platforms like Opendoor more relevant. If Opendoor can position itself as the go-to marketplace for sellers, light on assets, heavy on AI tools and efficiency, the company could thrive in that environment. And this is where retail's role becomes so important. The open army isn't just cheering from the sidelines. They're actively shaping the conversation. They've submitted ideas to the board, pushing for an asset-light pivot, better Google ad presence, and AI-driven innovation. They're reminding the company that without sellers, there is no real estate market, and that focusing on the seller experience could make Opendoor the Airbnb of housing. They're pushing leadership to think bigger, faster, and bolder. And the fact that someone like Keith Rabois is echoing those calls gives them weight. So where does this leave us as the Labor Day weekend winds down? To me, it feels like a moment of inflection. The stock has consolidated after a volatile run, showing strength at higher levels. Insider buying has injected confidence. Retail remains energized and global, continuing to push the story forward. Keith Rabois has re-entered the conversation, reinforcing the need for stronger leadership and vision. And Eric Jackson's streak may be ending, but the momentum he's built is far from over. If anything, it's evolving into a new phase, one where the connection between retail, leadership, and potential board shifts becomes the central story. That's why I remain bullish. Not just because the stock is consolidating, or because rate cuts could provide a macro tailwind, but because the ingredients for a true transformation are visible. Insider alignment, retail activism, founder DNA. These aren't just buzzwords, they're the elements that can turn a company around. And while it's important to stay measured, volatility is a given, profit-taking will happen, and leadership changes take time, the trajectory feels clear. This is a company in transition, a stock being reshaped by forces that don't come together often. Retail has lit the spark. Leadership is starting to fuel the fire. And voices like Keith Rabois are ensuring that the vision doesn't get lost along the way. So as we head into next week, the story isn't about whether the stock opens at 450 or 470. It's about whether the pieces of this puzzle continue to align. If Shrisha follows through with more board alignment, if Eric's office visit creates a symbolic connection, if Keith continues to push publicly, and if retail keeps pressing their case, then Opendoor could emerge from this moment stronger, leaner, and better positioned for growth. And that's the bigger picture investors should keep in mind. This isn't just another meme-driven surge. It's not empty hype. It's a convergence of grassroots energy, insider conviction, and founder vision, all coming together at a time when the macro environment could soon shift in Opendoor's favor. If that alignment holds, the long-term upside is enormous. So my message this weekend is simple: be patient, stay focused, and recognize what's happening here. Consolidation isn't weakness, it's preparation. Insider buying isn't noise, it's conviction. Retail chatter isn't hype, it's influence. And Keith Rabois' commentary isn't nostalgia, it's validation. Together, they point to a company that may be on the verge of writing its next great chapter. Enjoy the long weekend, but keep your eyes on the bigger picture. Because when markets reopen, the story of Opendoor isn't starting over, it's just beginning.